All right, people. I mean, look, they say that, you never forget your roots, but I think I decided to take that to a whole new meaning because, I mean, we're still unfortunately separated by the means of COVID for the purposes of this recording podcast. But, I mean, Chris, I don't know. Do you recognize this old location? Is this old location giving you some memories right about now?
It is, yeah. It's very reminiscent of the early days of the podcast.
It is indeed.
It's good to see that going into a new year,
Yeah, especially I figured, well, I could lie through my teeth and say that this was totally, completely planned from the beginning for the first episode of the podcast. But again, that would just go against who I am as every fiber of my being. No, I was just, funnily enough, recording my top 10 worst movies of 2020 up here. And I just realized, hey, let's test out this little Ethernet thingy that supposedly my parents say that I have up here. And lo and behold, it works. So fingers crossed that we don't have any network cutouts for the purposes of tonight, because, oh man, I feel like that would just save my luck more than anything else. But people, we're back. It's a Talking TV podcast, officially beginning season 3 with our first podcast episode of the year. Chris, how you doing, man?
Dude, I am fired up. Happy New Year, everyone. Welcome back. We have a lot to talk about tonight. Starting off the new year with a freaking bang.
And we were the only ones that knew that this was going to be the best way to open up the new year, because again, Ralph Macchio and Billy Zabka, they've got their ear to the ground as far as that goes, because they knew, they're like, January 8th, why would we wait like a full week and a half? Let's just open the shit up. Let's open the new year with this. This is like the biggest thing on Netflix when it hits. So let's do this. And for the most part, it seems to be paying off. Now, I mean, it's weird because, I mean, I don't know. We'll see obviously what kind of the new Netflix, trends are for this year. But it seemed like obviously Cobra Kai, when seasons 1 and 2 smashed on Netflix, they just like took everything by storm. Like the show had already gotten a pretty significant following on YouTube, but like people weren't ready just for like the impact that this had. And that was kind of like in the string of like a couple of hits that Netflix had that just randomly dropped when it dropped an old show last year. Obviously, the other two significant ones being Community and Avatar: The Last Airbender. Those are just a couple of the things that we covered on the podcast last year. But one of the things that I'm definitely looking forward to this year, just as far as what we're going to accomplish as far as the podcast goes, is kind of seeing if Netflix is going to be able to continue that trajectory for this year, especially considering that they got a lot more competition going forward, just as far as, the other streamers have had a chance to really make their mark. Amazon, Disney Plus, Apple TV Plus, Hulu, HBO Max, all those streaming services are here to stay. And it's going to be interesting, to say the least, whether Netflix can continue to kind of like really have the impact that they've had in the last couple of years,
Dog.
Yeah.
And Peacock has been going incredibly hard with the advertising.
I wanted to ask you about that. Have you got a chance to check it out yet? As far as is that actually like, are they actually like getting views, or are they just like leaning in hard into the advertisement right now in order to say, hey, we have The Office right now, please come and watch us?
Well, that's what they're doing, but they did something extremely smart where they're releasing never before aired episodes and exclusive behind the scenes footage. There's a whole second series about The Office on Hulu. I think it's called like The Break Room or something, and apparently fans are loving it. So they are doing it the smartest way you can do it for someone who is trying to enter a space that is very saturated. And they have other amazing shows on there too. They have Friends. I mean, Friends and The Office alone were huge draws for Netflix. So Netflix has got to step it up. And I hate to give Netflix credit, that, but damn, did they start this year off with a freaking bang.
Yeah, they did. Like they knew. I mean, again, we're fools to think that this is just another situation of an actor saying, hey, you wanted this a week early, you're going to get it. No, this is Netflix reading the terrain and saying, look, we know we got a lot of competition on the horizon. We got to start this new year off, start Q1 off right. And they did it in the absolute most bombastic way possible, Chris, because Cobra Kai, man, you talked me into it last year, and thank God you did, because I was not quite ready for the trip that I got with those first 2 seasons. The first season, kind of a little bit of a jolt to the system as far as like, oh, okay, so this is the different directions that we can take to the kind of the nostalgia wave that we've been on these last couple of years. Okay, this is interesting, I'll say the least. Definitely piqued my interest. Then season 2 came along, and I was like, wow, okay, they're really running with this now, for better or for worse. Like, I certainly didn't like a lot of the more soap operatic elements that came in season 2, but I was like, okay, sure, they're running with it, most definitely. And now we're on season 3. Luckily, they were able to get this season entirely produced, shot, and edited before the pandemic set in. Again, it was just a matter of YouTube backed out on them at the last second before they ever got a chance to air them, and then they were shopping it around, and Netflix picked it up. And again, extremely smart decision on Netflix's part, because, oh man, when this thing came, it was the latest smash hit of last year. But Chris, Cobra Kai season 3, It drops a week early on January 1st. My question is first, do you watch the first episode as soon as you wake up on New Year's Day?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, because
What else were you gonna do?
Okay, I just wanted to make sure. I just wanted to make sure I wasn't the only one that did that, because I'm like, okay, I can't be that guy. But I did that. I woke up again unnaturally early on New Year's Day. I put on the first episode, and oh man, like I knew I was in for some ridiculousness just based on the trailer, but I didn't realize just quite what I was in for. And after, like, just to put this in perspective, I binged the entire 10 episodes in 2 days, and I still don't know whether it's a good season or not, if that makes any sense. That might be a little bit premature for me to say kicking off the podcast, but like I certainly had
that's a hot take.
No, here's the thing. I had a blast watching it. I had an absolute blast watching it. I was so entertained while watching it, but I couldn't tell if it was a sense of like, okay, this is like actually genuinely thrilling, or this is like a CW level of schlock that I'm just so deep and invested in at this point that I just don't know if I can get out of it. I was hoping that I could like come to some sense of clarity, because I view these podcast sessions as basically my therapy. I think it's safe to say. I just think that it's good for both of us just as far as that goes. But like, maybe you can help me to like collect my thoughts overall. Just like, what were your thoughts going into Cobra Kai season 3? What you thought the season was gonna do overall, and then kind of like what your thoughts were once you actually saw where the season went and kind of what that spells for the future of the show.
Sure, yeah. So, I mean, season 2 ended on such a high note. It was, I was nervous. I mean, how do you follow that up? And then all the hype on I guess, the off season in between season 2 and season 3. Netflix is picking it up, and we're unsure of the future of the show, but we're definitely at least getting a 3rd season. And then it goes to Netflix and it hits number 1, and it's got this whole second Netflix fan base that wasn't on YouTube, which, by the way, the pilot on YouTube got 83 million hits. So, I mean, it already had a massive fan base. The show only got bigger. And so just to have like this unsure, cloudy history around a viral web series was kind of crazy, considering this seems like any investor studio's daydream, like to have something that is a surefire smash. So I was nervous because there was so much hype, and there's pressure when hype comes, and we've seen so many TV shows crumble under expectations, especially in this new day and age where fans are so aggressive and they'll tweet at you to get what they want, and then when you give them what they want and it sucks, they realize, oh, that's not what we wanted. And we've seen, I mean, just look at Star Wars, for example, the most recent trilogy. And so I was nervous because I actually thought season 2, while it did introduce a lot of soap operatic elements, I enjoyed them for what they were. Although I do think that it sort of added the first sense of real schlock to the show. I thought season 1 was uniquely its own. And so I wouldn't put the word schlock there, but season 2 certainly got a little more soap opera-esque in the sense with the wife storyline getting more involved, and the more parental aspects of like, Daniel's son and his daughter, and sort of like wanting to let her, date and be a grown up, but also that's still his daughter and she's still only 17. And it's just such a soap opera storyline there. But they ended on a great note. Like, I thought they actually sort of fought their way out of the kind of soap opera hole.
Pun intended?
Pun intended for sure.
All right.
That they put themselves in. And then season 3 comes along, and the trailers had me really worried, to be honest with you. I know I didn't tell you anything about that.
No, you didn't.
But
you're very coy about that.
Just because I hate trailers and I hate marketing and advertising, and that's kind of why I think I want to get into marketing, so I can try and fix it and make it a little more honest or to the point. Like a show like Cobra Kai, we don't need to be clickbaited, like I knew that whole Miguel falling on the floor and Johnny yelling at him thing, I knew that was going to be a tiny small moment, and the trailers made it seem like that was the end all be all pinnacle of the show. And I'm really glad that wasn't, because I actually thought that this season was simultaneously so mature while getting back to the immature nature of the first season, but avoiding all the schlock that I was afraid could have been there. So that's kind of my initial reaction. And now I'm sure we'll start to unpack that and everything that comes with it.
Absolutely. So it's so fun. And I'm actually really glad that you told me that, because I'm not going to say that I had the exact same thoughts about you, but my thoughts were definitely wavering on the line. Like, my whole thing was, and I think I told you this after we talked about the show on the first episode, was that I said, I'm like, okay, I obviously made clear that, again, very similar to you, I was not a fan of season 2 over season 1. Again, like, I think everyone can agree season 1 very much established the tone of the show as far as like kind of like being its own unique thing. And then season 2, the soap opera elements were what they really leaned into. But the weird thing about it is that as much as I didn't like them in season 2, I appreciated how kind of hard they leaned into it in order to over dramatize it, because the messages were still good. That to me was the saving grace of season 2, is that as ridiculous and as bombastic as that season got, at the very least the messages and the central theme that the show was still going for was still very, very much there. And after watching the trailers for season 3, I had very similar thoughts to you, where I'm like, oh my god, they are just going for it now. They're just the all full stops are off. They just don't care. These characters are achieving full level cartoon status. Like, they're just going for it. But there was a small part of me that was like, wait a minute. But you also kind of like that about season 2. So if they're going full ham in season 3, isn't that a good thing? Because I've made this more than clear. I'm like, if you're going to go stupid, go all the way. Don't try to half-ass it. That's what I hate about most things. That was most things, when they have something that they know is dumb, they half-ass it. And Cobra Kai knows that at the end of the day, as introspective as they get about the issues that they bring up, they understand that at the end of the day, this is the fact that a toxic relationship between two 50-year-olds that was never properly resolved has now spilled over into a new generation of kids, and that just kind of toxic masculinity is just taking a hold of them, and it has caused them to do all sorts of stupid shit. And the fact that the show is constantly acknowledging the fact that it is stupid, it's not quite to the point where it's annoying, but it's still to the point where it's like, you have like that strong sense of disbelief that like makes you question why it is that you watch the show, but at the same time, it allows you to just turn that logic part of your brain off just enough in order to enjoy it. I hope that none of that shit that I said makes sense, but it's just kind of my way of coming to it reckoning, because I think that the number one reason that while this show's surface is extremely familiar, like literally no joke, like I was keeping track of all the romantic beats that this show had between the kids this season. And I was like, wow, Dawson's Creek, OC. Like, I was just listing off the CW shows in my head. And I'm like,
Sure,
wow,
yeah.
okay. Like, they're really going for it. But I think it still does an excellent job. I would say that this season even did a better job when it came to the characters and how they kind of factored into the overall story and just overall centrally what the themes of the show are. Because regardless of the surface level, the themes are still very good. Just as far as the two main things, obviously, to take away from this show, I think it's safe to say, are different perspectives on events and how, like, from different people, and just how, toxicity can take root and traverse throughout, like, different people and affect different people differently. And we saw that, again, it's something that I think the show established very, very well on in season 1. It got away from a little bit in season 2, even though it was still there, like, the inklings were still there, but it went fully back into it in season 3. And I think it actually crafted for some of the show's best moments, if I do say so.
Yeah, I could see some of those points, and I actually agree with a few of them. Like the ability that they were able to weave this web of suspending your disbelief in such a way where you understood that it was ridiculous and it was totally illogical and sometimes over the top. As the kids say, it was extra. But it was so charming that you were just like, sure, we're going to sneak into the zoo and steal a snake because this is Cobra Kai and this is what we do. And like, you didn't question it, because I think with this season,
I was that one guy that did. I'm like, really? You're stealing a snake? That's what we're doing now?
yeah, I mean, look, it's certainly corny, but to me, it's like the good kind of corny, where it's because these characters are so well written and so fleshed out, even if they are put in these sort of soap opera-esque situations or these borderline cartoon-esque scenarios. It's just they're so alive and they're so deep and their motives are always so clear. Like, that's one of the things I think that the show did really well this season. We sort of had this like triangle feud between Kreese, Daniel-san, and of course Johnny Lawrence, Billy Zabka's character. And it could have got really confusing, because not only are we balancing the big three, the first generation of karate kid characters in their triangle feud of who's going to be the number one dojo in the valley, we now have all these intermingling love stories. And then what this season did was, not only did it take the kids and make them more adults as they're in their senior year of high school and they're getting ready to graduate, thinking about colleges and all that type of stuff, it also like put the wife as a character, and it brought these cameos back from the older Karate Kid 2 and other Karate Kid movies, the first Karate Kid, the original girlfriend. And so I guess what I'm really trying to say is, the reason that my suspension of my disbelief was acceptable in this scenario, where, other shows that take themselves way more seriously fail, is because this show does the homework that I don't think a lot of shows nowadays are doing, where it's like, I know every single way that Miguel, that, Johnny, that freaking even Daniel's wife would act in a situation, because they're so thought out and they're all so consistent. And I think that really helped a lot. Just the tender love and care that's put into this show is one of the reasons why I think so many people love it, whether they realize it or not.
Yeah, these creators, Josh Heald, John Hurwitz, and Hayden Schlossberg. Oh my God, I can't believe I actually got those three right off the top of my head. Deserve all the credit in the world, because it shows that even though, again, they know that they certainly have a tone when it comes to it, they know these characters, and they very clearly love this lore, and they very clearly want to do justice to this story and this characters. And I wanted to touch on what you just brought up there with the bringing back the other older characters. Again, like, I feel like that's something that, again, a lot of shows would just fall into and just use as an excuse in order to, do the member berries from South Park, which, again, is something, it's just a trope that this show could have fallen victim to so many, just as easily. And to an extent it is, but the thing that I probably love the most about when Daniel goes back to Okinawa and he meets with the characters from the Karate Kid 2 is that they're there to once again, kind of continue with teaching him, and as showing that, like, yeah, even though he's like older now and is clearly on the side of good, for better, for worse, he does still have a lot to learn. And that's a thing that I really like that the show never got away from, is that even though much more so now than in the first season, the show has some very clear bad guys, the show is still going into those moral gray areas and exploring just every different perspective of all the traditional black and white, kind of villains and heroes from the 80s. And I love how they go into that with every new character that they bring in, because they still do. They take the chance. That's the thing that I think I really liked this season that I felt like was kind of lacking from season 2 a little bit, whereas season 2 was still kind of riding off the high of the first season. This season, like, we got so much more backstory with Kreese, with Tori, with Ali, with the Karate Kid 2 characters, with what's it called? Poor Robbie. I'm sorry. I'll touch on him a little bit later when we break down the characters, but poor Robbie. This kid cannot catch a freaking break. Oh my God. We saw that a little bit with Carmen. Yeah, we saw that obviously, just with them deciding to hire back Daniel's idiot cousin from that first season. We kind of that questionable decision just from a business sense, but
he's a great example of what I'm trying to say. It's like every situation they put him in, as silly and as ridiculous as he is, it makes total sense because it feels so true to the character. This show does not leave any stone unturned when it comes to like there, if you're directing a show, sometimes actors will ask directors, how do I feel in this situation? Like, I need more. I feel like they're never asking that of their directors, because these characters are just so locked in, rock solid.
Oh yeah.
I
mean, it helps that half the cast is returning people from characters that they've already played, so that certainly does help. But it's definitely a sense of where, again, it's like they say you can never teach an old dog new tricks, but again, when Billy Zabka talked about this, he was actually just recently interviewed by Bill Simmons, where he talked about the fact that it's like, oh yeah, once these guys pitched it to me, it was basically kind of like already the idea that I had been kind of conceiving of where Johnny would be 30, 40 years later. He doesn't leave the valley. He's working dead-end jobs. He completely fell apart. He's still depending on his stepdad every once in a while for money. And these creators just understood that and ran with it, and it just kind of spawned this entire idea of Cobra Kai, where it's like, yeah, well, Daniel probably never got a chance to get away either, and he's made his life here and he achieved everything he wanted, but there's still some sensitive in him that's just not there, overall. And Johnny, for better for worse, is coming to fill that void in his life. And it's funny to say, because I watched Johnny and Daniel specifically in this season, and I'm reminded of my brother's relationship with his best friend of the last couple of years from swimming. And kind of every time I talk with this said best friend's girlfriend, and I've heard that his girlfriend reminds me of Daniel's wife, in the sense of where she's like, yeah, I'm just playing second fiddle to these two at this point. These two really are the true married couple, because, oh my God. Well, I mean, can Johnny and Daniel seriously just get a room already? It's their petty feud is already to this amount of ridiculous, but just when in the first episode when they were looking for Robbie, I was like, and they were doing the Tango and Cash riff. I'm like, wow, okay.
It seems like they're about to get a room. I mean, season 4 seems like it's going to be, and kudos to the show for literally getting confirmed 2 hours after the first season dropped. But no, I'm totally with you on all of it, man, with what you're saying. And so I kind of want to even get more specific as to why I think this type of stuff worked. There was many moments where Hawk, who it was very obvious he was going to have that dark night of the soul and come around and sort of save the day. And there were so many moments where they could have jumped the gun, where they could have forced that earlier on, but they did a really good job of showing him break whatever his name's arm, and then sort of Dimitri, break Dimitri's arm, and then sort of dial back and feel remorse, but Cobra Kai consumed him again, and so it's almost like he forgot about that. And then there was that moment where, they're about to steal the snake, and Hawk's very upset because he's not the man anymore. So what they did there, those are two different emotions, right? One's jealousy, and then one's like feeling regret and sadness, and they showed all the different ways that Cobra Kai was breaking him down, eventually leading to the dark night of the soul. It wasn't like that cheap sort of movie moment where it's like, oh, that one incident happened now, so later he's obviously going to come back, but it's based on that one stupid little thin, tiny, you can't even see that gap, like, you know what I mean? It's like this thing was thought out and developed, where when it happened, you knew it was going to happen, but it felt so right because you saw all the different moments that Cobra Kai broke him down. And I never expected a show like this, as silly as this, to get with kid actors for the most part, no name actors really just finding their stride to deliver such an emotional payoff. It's crazy to me to think that I can talk this deeply about Cobra Kai.
Yeah, not gonna lie. At the risk of getting ahead of myself, I'll just say right now, the moment in that last fight when Eli finally has his turn and turns back to the side of good and saves Dimitri from the bullies, and the two of them team up and start taking everyone outside. I was cheering. I was freaking cheering. I'm like, what? I'm like, awesome. I hated this kid last season and at the beginning of this season, and it managed to turn me around that hard. And also for it to pull off the doubleheader of getting me to like Dimitri, who was a character that I could not friggin' stand. Like, the show knew what it was doing, and this show definitely has legs. Like, that really just gets into, like, what I wanted to dive in with each one of these characters, because each one of those characters, I feel like this was the season where, for lack of a better word, this was the no turning back moment. This is the moment where, it's funny how I'm seeing this with each, like, TV show that I watch and how I break it down season by season, how the piece that each season, individual season, kind of plays in the overall story of a show. And this was the moment where all the characters were set in their path. And there were a lot of characters who I was disappointed at, and other characters who I knew exactly where they were going to go with that. That was kind of a majority cast. But again, there were those few characters that managed to surprise me and make me happy. And just the direction that the Cobra Kai students went under Kreese's direction, and kind of how he was bringing in kind of the old school bullies, and just the kind of the show's use of its continuity. I think that I have not been a big fan of recent shows, is that recent shows will bring in characters for a season and then just make them disappear. And then by the time you finish with it, it's like, oh, it was just a bunch of individual, pieces. They're never really, the thing that you always loved about shows of old is that whenever you would get to the last couple of seasons, you would always get the returning guest player from the first season in order to kind of harken it back and make the show feel like a fully well-rounded experience. And I like that these guys are doing that. And I like that these guys kind of understand that. In addition to pulling from all the Karate Kid movies, they're also kind of establishing their own lore and mythos and harkening back to the first season, because the bits, obviously, with the original bullies, the one thing I will say is I definitely did the focus on Miguel's recovery definitely robbed him of the most character-wise. I felt like character-wise he didn't have that much to do this season. I felt like it was mostly on Johnny, at least for the first half, and there are kind of a couple of problems that I had with him this season. But okay. This was without a doubt like the moment to me where all the characters are set, and they're making their path forward, just as far as Johnny and Daniel finally teaming up and finally putting, it seems like for now, their petty feud to rest, and understanding that Kreese is the greater enemy overall. But again, the show did not hold back when it came to Kreese either, because again, for a man who came in and ultimately proved to be the next Emperor Palpatine, as far as I'm concerned, is just be that slimy villain that just delights in being the absolute most evil, scummiest person on the planet. We got some very unexpected and very refreshing backstory with him, to say the least. And
he really, oh man, dude,
provided for probably some of the best parts of this season. Like with those Vietnam War flashbacks, I was expecting, again, I saw the cheap Netflix sets and I'm like, oh God, what are we in for now? Like first with the cheap 1950 sets and then with the Vietnam sets. And I was pleasantly surprised, to say the least, as far as how good that stuff was.
Dude, 110%. Real quick before I give you my sort of thoughts on that, because I have a lot of thoughts, and I think jumping into Kreese is a good jumping off point. Of course, we have some folks in the chat. We got Stranger Boy. Thank you for hanging, man. And we have Drunk 3PO. Dude, I was literally just watching your Gina Carano interview before we got on here to record this podcast. Good work, man. So small world. Thanks for giving us some of your time. Appreciate that. Now, Dom, I got to say, what they did with Kreese could have been so freaking corny. It could have been so Arrow B storyline of like season 2 or season 1, wherever he was doing those sort of flashbacks to like the island and he met Slade and they were sort of like, but it wasn't.
It had the visual look for a bit.
This show literally does karate around all of the BS that other CW shows have to endure. Like, it's totally a CW show.
Oh,
Totally,
absolutely.
totally. But at the same time, it's like kind of like a hybrid and a first of its kind, where there's actually respectable filmmaking, legitimate writing, and depth to characters that we don't get. And this show defies so many odds, and with what they are able to do with these young actors, and sort of the way that they're able to bring in this ode to Miyagi and go to Okinawa. And that could have also, like the Kreese storyline, been terrible. That could have tanked so hard. It could have been corny. It could have been, oh my God, they ordered 10 episodes and they have to fill this, of course. But it was so enriching. It actually made my love for the second movie stronger. It actually enhanced those characters who were already amazing and well written in the first place back in the 80s. And it did all of that without being contrived, without feeling forced, just feeling natural. Like, oh, of course, this is the logical step. Daniel's in Japan. He's in a very, very tough situation. This is the first time he's risking financial stability in his life. And where's he going to go? What's he going to turn to? Miyagi, that one presence in his life. And that could be really corny, It could be like a Smallville type corny storyline where he turns to his saving grace, and in the last moment he finds the strength because we knew he was going to do that. And it's not that we don't know that's going to happen in Cobra Kai, but the way they do it is just so human. And I'm just like, John Horowitz, man, and the rest of that creative team, I don't know how you write this kind of television, because it's not full of itself when it easily should be.
Right.
It's not schlock when it easily should be. It's nothing like I've seen before, and Kreese is a great example of that, because we've seen these flashbacks. We've seen these corny, like, oh, let's just like take Vietnam or Korea, wherever war that was, and just make it intense and wild, and sort of, this is the reason why he's evil. We need this moment because we're running out of pages, and so we're going to fill this in. But it actually like showed his turn to who he is in such a way that when we get to those last few episodes, it's not that we didn't know who Kreese was, but now we know him even better than we did back in the 80s, than we did back in season 2. And this is going to be a tough act to follow this next season.
It really is, because, like, I'm not going to lie, like, Kreese definitely had his Anakin Skywalker moment this season, where, like,
for sure.
Literally to the point where, first off, like, when that army colonel just, like, went, like, again, was showing, like, how he was, like, the Kreese before Kreese, and telling him, when they were about to go over that Vietnam fighting pit, over the snake pit, and he's like, oh, yeah, your girlfriend's dead. He's like, what? He's like, yeah, wrap yourself around a tree, waiting for you to come home. And I was like, and then, of course, after that, he's like, all right, let me up. Fight's over. It's like, you're right, Colonel. What's it called? I can't show mercy. It was just like, it was so good. Like, I knew every single line before it was going to happen, and it was still friggin' great. And again, I have it written down here, man, this show is leaning into its stupidity. And it absolutely is, because as good as the stories are, and I will back you up on every single point that you bring up, Chris, the stories and just everything that they were going with, again, the show was batting a million as far as that goes. But good friggin' God, do they lead into the absurdity. Like, I'm talking, you thought the fight at the end of in the high school at the end of season 2 was ridiculous? You got a fight in an arcade that like feels right at a Lost Boys. You got a fight in the middle of the LaRusso's house. You have Daniel literally traveling to Japan, friggin' Kurosawa style, and then literally get saved by the biggest Deus Ex Machina I've ever seen. Like, you want to talk about a freaking coincidence right there. You have Amanda getting directly involved in now, rather than being the kind of, fretful wife and everything. She is now actively getting involved and is actively like helping Daniel in his feud. It's like, okay, I don't know like what kind of behavior this qualifies as, just overall, like, I don't know what a clinical psychologist would diagnose this as.
Yeah.
But, and she freaking gets involved and slaps Kreese. That courtroom hearing, which was like, I swear to God, I felt like I was right back in like Injustice for All with that scene. I'm like, I was waiting for Al Pacino to show up and start yelling, "You're out of order," and "You're out of order." I was waiting for that to happen.
Yeah.
Like, oh man. But again, I think I texted this to you a couple times. The show gets away with it because even though it is the most bullshit soap opera on its sleeves, the stories and the themes and the messages it's going for are so good. And it's funny because, like, I can imagine a 10-year-old, every single time I think to myself, this is so fucking stupid. I think to myself, if I were 10 years old watching this show, and how I would think this is the freaking coolest thing ever. And I'm like, you know what? For that alone, like that already accentuated. And I don't want to demean this by saying, oh, that means only a 10-year-old can watch this and get something out of it. But because it does have a lot of those life lessons. But like, come on, dude. Like,
Yeah, no, I hear you. It's, I was thinking about this, and I can't continue to say good things without sort of understanding that there are some problems with this season, but that this show is going to always have problems, and especially I think for people like us who really look to get so much out of everything we watch because we love this. And so one of the big problems I think that this season had was where season 2 actually, I think, built up to the ridiculous, the silliness, the school fight. This season was already there because we're picking up where we left off. So we have this arcade fight, and all of a sudden they're in this abandoned section of the arcade, and there's no rules and there's no laws. That's just too convenient. And then they break into the zoo, and they even say it on the show. They're like, there's like barely any cameras, and like we've tested out the security. This is ridiculous, but we're going to steal this snake. And it's like that. So that's ridiculous. They're literally breaking into a zoo.
Oh man.
And then, of course, all of the sort of giant scenes where the LaRussos are looked at as like the black sheep of the town now, and no one wants to speak to them because they're essentially blamed for Miguel being in a coma for half the season, which, I mean, they definitely share some of that blame. That was fair. But just the ridiculousness of sort of diluting those moments with like, I heard you were the bad guy. And like all of that, like old school hearkening to like the fan theories about Billy Zabka actually being the good guy in the original Karate Kid. It's silly. And I think that they do shoot themselves in the foot a little bit with sort of the jovial nature of the storylines that are centered around such hate, yet they're in the most ridiculous situations, exemplifying their hatred. They're in an arcade. They're, you know what I'm trying to say. It
reminds me of kind of the subject matter wise? It reminds me of Andy Samberg, just like whenever he's at a roast, where whenever you see Andy Samberg, very, very funny, very goofy person overall. And whenever you see him at like a roast where he's like, gotta go hard, you're expecting him to go so hard. And then he opens his mouth and you remember, oh wait, it's Andy Samberg. He's not going to say anything that's like actually harmful. At the most, he's going to be self-deprecating towards himself, like he always is. But for the most part, it's really soft and really kind of streamlined. And that's what this kind of feels like, where it feels like, they're shaping themselves up for like the most super over dramatic events. And then they're just like tussling in an arcade and like messing with each other at school. And like the one bit that I will say that was actually really, really funny and really clever was when Hawk kind of uses Eli face as a facade, as like, oh, sorry, they can't touch me because I'm in my safe space. That I thought was, I'm like, okay, that's fucking brilliant. That's genius as far as like how the show was kind of poking fun. That was bringing back season 1, kind of the idea of like, the modern world becoming, making kids too soft overall. I thought that was actually like an interesting theme overall. And I'm kind of really glad that the show kind of brought that back, if for nothing else, to poke fun at it. But again, that's one of the show's high points.
Yeah, that was interesting, and I kind of wanted to talk about that theme that this show has sort of carried. And I do agree they got away from it a little bit in season 2, but it's not that those things aren't needed, but sometimes things go a little too far. And I actually really respect the fact that these guys, especially the young actors and actresses, they're going to be in Hollywood, hopefully, for a long time. And this is kind of dangerous to be in a production that is sort of going so far against that bubble that everyone's created. So I kind of respect them for that, because look at South Park with the whole PC principal character. It's like sometimes going too far is funny because we need to also get our knees scraped a bit and learn from getting a little mud in our face as kids. And, you can't always be protected. So I do actually, when it comes to karate and a story about growth, and essentially what is a coming of age meets a sort of coming into the later half of your life. Like we have those two elements going in regards to our older cast and our younger cast, both growing and maturing at distinct points in their lives. I actually really thought that was a nice texture that this show has, where they show that people aren't perfect and people aren't clean. And I think that's kind of what also helps to separate it from the CW-esque qualities that it has and make it stand out. And I do respect them for that, because, people have been canceled for less, and shows have been thrown off the air for less. So I think it's bold for sure. And I don't think it's too far either, in my opinion.
No, absolutely. And so that actually brought me to a specific character, because we talked about a couple of the characters. We talked about Hawk. We talked about Kreese. I wanted to get to Tori and some of the bigger characters, but we get now to arguably, I would say, the most problematic character for me personally, not for the show, but for me personally, just for the simple fact that for the majority of the show, I just haven't liked this character, even though he's a perfectly, very compelling character. But it's the show has effectively made its punching bag up until this point, and now we're at the end of season 3, we understand why, and that's Robbie. Poor Robbie. Oh man, this kid just cannot catch a break from having to deal with his junkie mom, who is now in rehab, to finally seemingly having his dream life with the LaRussos, dating Sam in a relationship that seemed doomed to that just seemed doomed overall, and ultimately was doomed to juvie after tossing Miguel off of the balcony and going on the run and then getting ratted out by Daniel to the cops. Of course, Johnny is still nowhere to be found as per usual. And yeah, it's like, look, Johnny and Robbie's relationship is, not been a high point, to say the least. And again, I think the show has done a very good job of balancing that up until this point of just showing, yeah, Johnny's, just doesn't have his own shit together. How can he possibly, be there to be a good father? But I definitely think that this season kind of started to get to the point where it's like, okay, if there was one storyline where I would say, okay, this felt just a tiny bit manipulated by the plot armor, and this feels like the plot needing to push this storyline along, it would be the Robbie storyline, because, and I got as far as, again, the point A and then ending at point B, I understood completely. Again, Robbie's pissed at both Daniel, Robbie's rightfully pissed at Johnny, and feels betrayed now by Daniel, who was effectively his surrogate father. Now, who comes in? Kreese, to swoop him in and effectively turn Johnny's own son against him. That's a good idea in concept. I don't think it was executed as properly as it could have been, only because it just felt like there were points where Johnny made one attempt to get close to Robbie, screwed up, and then just went right back to Miguel because it was easier. And I'm like, my guy, come on. Like, I get this is Cobra Kai, but this is your kid, and he's literally in jail now, effectively, to some extent because of you. You should be doing a bit of a better job. And it felt too easy, when Kreese comes in and just basically so easily turns him against him, and then when Johnny's fighting him at the end, I'm like, don't get me wrong, like I said, I've made fun of Robbie relentlessly, but again, it's not to Robbie's fault. I think the actor does a fine job, and the character is still a good character, but this was the first time where I'm like, oh, I feel like this character is kind of sort of being manipulated, And like, that might just be me, and for all intents and purposes, I hope I'm the only one that thinks that, but like, am I crazy here?
No, you're not. I mean,
okay.
I think that there are something, like, this isn't a perfect season. I feel like I've been talking like it is, but it's not a perfect season. It's a damn good season. And I think it's reasons for Robbie being underdeveloped. I think really season 1 was where we saw the pinnacle of his growth. Unfortunately, we got his understanding of who he is, his backstory. We saw his mother, who has her own demons and her own problems. Obviously, his father, we've known to have problems for decades now. And, but that's kind of where the buck stopped with him. And it's also unfortunate that the buck kind of stopped for Miguel this season too. I mean, we saw his journey, we saw him grow, but we knew he was going to get back on his feet. That's the thing about this show. You know what's going to happen, and that's not why you watch it. At least that's not why I watch it. I watch to see how it's going to happen.
Agreed.
Because the way that they make things happen in the show is so different than every other beast of its kind. And unfortunately, with Miguel and Robbie, it was pretty predictable and pretty lackluster, which sucks because they're main cast for all intents and purposes. I know in this season, a lot of actors and actresses have jumped up to more of a higher billing, but those are still 2 of the core founding characters, and they were definitely underutilized.
Yeah, it was definitely a little bit of a kind of a for lack of a better word, kind of disappointment, especially because Miguel was my favorite character going in. Like, I feel like he was our guy, he was like the one guy that was constantly rooting for Johnny. He was, the Johnny's kind of first real connection back to the world. So obviously he's everyone's, he's the fan favorite character, and so it was definitely a little bit unsatisfying to kind of see, okay, he recovered. The one thing I will say is, again, I really did enjoy the recovery process, and I did enjoy the kind of rebonding with Johnny, how Johnny like kind of reinserted himself into Miguel's place and kind of understood it's like, yeah, we kind of mutually need each other overall. And that part was really good. But again, it was still a little bit of a detriment because Miguel was definitely used more of as a plot device than an actual character this season. It definitely showed when it's like, oh, the resolution is that he's just going to have to beat the same bully that he already beat the first time, only because he can actually use his legs now. It's like, okay, we get it. Like, I'm sorry, Miguel should have had no problem beating that guy at the end. And for them to, like, I get it, kind of showing the emphasis of where Kreese was going and the direction that he was taking Cobra Kai. But like, for all intents and purposes, there were a lot of points in that battle where it's like, okay, I get the need to like wrap up character arc in addition to having cool action. But like, that was the one where it just didn't feel as complete to me. Now, apropos of that, to Miguel and Robbie. Again, with some of the other side characters like Samantha, I'd make it Daniel's daughter. I would make an argument to say this is the best she's been in the entire show. Like she has some actual legitimate baggage to deal with, just as far as just her reaction to the whole Tori character and just kind of everything that she has to go through as far as like the PTSD and trauma. I think they actually did like a really good job of that, and I was actually really surprised because that was a character that I'm not gonna say I hated, but it was definitely like Samantha was never to me the most compelling character from those first 2 seasons, and she actually like really stepped it up.
No.
And also, again, the relationship between Eli and Dimitri, which was a relationship that I loved and again was really heartbroken to see. But at the same time, that I was reminded, oh wait, have you heard Dimitri talk? Like, if I had the chance to not be friends with this kid, I would absolutely not do it. And Hawk finally got that chance. Unfortunately, saw him become a toxic aggro dude, bro. But this season, we really saw him like go to the dark. Like of all the darkness that they were kind of delivering, that they were kind of promising with this season, with both as far as both Kreese and Hawk, and really Tori. But like, Tori we'll get to. Still not a fan of that character overall, but they delivered as far as I'm concerned. Like Hawk, like the moment where he's beating down on that kid who used to bully him, and he's like now got the upper hand. I was like, oh my god, like is somebody gonna pull him off? It looks like he's gonna kill that kid. Jesus, like, but then it was so good. Like, and again, just kind of him acknowledging that he's not number one. And like the crazy thing about it and how well they handled that arc is that the moment where he was with the bullies and he was kind of like, not letting the one chubby kid sit with them anymore. He wasn't necessarily back with the guys at the end because like he genuinely cared about them. He was back because like he'd lost his spot and he didn't want to lose his position of being number one. And yeah, it was awesome to see him get back with Dimitri at the end and seeing them kind of high five and then team up at the end against the Cobra Kai suits was awesome. But like I think they've really done a good job as far as turning that specific character around, because that was a character that I was beginning to hate and like was just beginning to like really worry about from his transition from season 1 into season 2.
I totally agree with all that. I think that this show did so much more good than it did bad. It really took so many of these characters that we were seeing and were a part of big scenes, but we're kind of just there because, well, they had to be there. It was the Danny and the Johnny show, and, it was the Miguel and the Robbie show, and everyone else was just kind of there, and like Hawk and Samantha. And so they took these characters and Dimitri, right, gave them such growth that now I care more about everything I see on the screen. Like every scene has more purpose now, but things suffered. Robbie, obviously, Miguel, obviously. And, you brought up another character that I also would say did suffer a little bit. I think, and I hope that this show, because this is a large cast, so really I got to give them credit. They really created a very enjoyable season for me, but I also think that there were some things that slipped through the cracks. So I want to let you take this one first because you said you had some thoughts on this character, but I think while we're in the things that didn't work, I kind of want to hear what you're saying about why said character did not work.
Yeah, the Tori character. So this was a character when she was introduced, I understood immediately what they were going for, and this season is kind of, I think the biggest reason why this character ultimately, because now after having seen her for 2 seasons now, does not work for me is that I think it's the only character on the show that they've given a lot of interesting backstory and a lot of good kind of moral gray area to, like they have with every other character on the show. The difference being is that character, and I don't know if it's the performance or just like, or maybe it's just kind of our interpretation of the character, but that character still feels very, very one note. And it's understandable because that character is supposed to be like a direct antagonist, but like when we've gotten such interesting and compelling backstory and moral gray area now from John friggin' Kreese of all people, and now like with the with the bad guys from Karate Kid 2, who again just showing how those characters have found inner peace overall, and again probably 2 of the best. I mean, like that 4th episode of the show might like that to me is like Emmy caliber writing right there. I'm not even kidding, and I can't believe I'm saying this about freaking Cobra Kai of all shows.
I know,
but the Tori character to me, it's still an example of, okay, this is the one area where all of these themes, like, and it's kind of falling into like really one note. Like the character is still like so unlikable to a fault, and she's still using all of her like kind of problems that she's had inherently in her life to like just make excuses to be a terrible person. And I think the difference between her and the other antagonists in the show is the other antagonists use their pain for better or for worse as a strength, and she's still kind of coasting off of her pain and just using it as like she's the only kind of traditional bully on the show, and it's really kind of dissatisfying when you see her intermingled with such diverse characters, and she just comes off as yet another one-note bully. And like I really don't know, like do you think that is from the performance of the actor?
No, I actually have a theory as to why I
Okay.
think that is. And I think one thing I've noticed since John Kreese has taken over Cobra Kai, I think it's who he is and the values he instills in these kids and the way that they then have to be written under him being their sensei really makes them one note because he's not really that deep of a character. I mean, the backstory that we got enriches what we see him do, but in the present day, he's still pretty one note. He's hell bent on destroying Johnny for leaving him and being the fallen student, and he wants to get LaRusso out of the valley any way, shape, or form and be the ultimate dojo. And, he gets predictable very, very fast and very quickly. If you can't beat these newcomers, you're out. Why are you going back to your place in line? And so I really just think it's them working with what they're given. I think that these characters have potential. I do feel like the whole relationship between Robbie and, sorry, I forget her name. What's her name again? Tori. There's so many freaking names in this show. They could have had so much more of a connection, being both on probation, being both sort of the less fortunate of the cast. And all their connection really was being puppets for Kreese to manipulate the adults that he was trying to slight, and that got old very quickly. These are characters with emotions and feelings, and all you're using them for is to get back at your former student. All you're using them for is to strengthen your numbers, to, beat up more young kids. I wanted more from these characters who do have rich, interesting things to explore. I mean, they have arguably some of the most life experience out of the young cast that we have, as far as the way they've been written and what their characters have been through. And yet, so it feels criminal for them to be one note.
Yeah, definitely. And that was definitely a storyline that they were like trying to build to, as far as the kind of the moments where it's like, oh, it's juvy, and it's like, don't bother filling out the form, they don't care, like those are all the pieces. I'm like, okay, all the pieces are there, like, and then just where did that go? Oh, we're gonna steal Snake from a zoo. What? Oh, okay, like, okay, we're just back in Vietnam. Like, those were the points where like the show got a little silly. So,
and real quick, while we're talking about Tori, because you brought up that snake scene, it's like you would think that if. And this is where, like, obviously some of the writing fell through the cracks, because it's like Robbie, he still went along with it, but he at least thought, like, should I be doing this right now? Trespassing, sneaking in, I'm on probation. But her character was just so one note, so brainwashed by Kreese that she was Cobra Kai till she died, almost to a fault, to a character fault, that she didn't even think twice about trespassing or stealing. And it didn't make sense to me. Someone who cares about their mother that much is just going to be so gung-ho to go in there and rob something.
Yeah, right.
I don't know.
It's like, yeah, we get it. You don't care, but it's like, have a freaking brain, It's like that's just the point. It's the point where the good storytelling doesn't save the soap opera nature of it, because again, like, there's a reason why soap operas are soap operas. So the last kind of thing that I wanted to tackle with this season is, of course, again, the thing that started it all, that never-ending feud between Johnny and Daniel, because even when these two have gone from like a kind of, former rivalry, co-joined to just bitter enemies and now kind of frenemies, with, again, them acknowledging the Kreese is the greater foe. And it really kind of settled into that bromance buddy cop phase, that first episode where they're doing the Tango and Cash riff. And I guess, and again, obviously, they, at the end, combine their dojos. Miyagi-Do and what is it? Eagle Fang is what he calls his new dojo or whatever, have merged.
Oh, ridiculous.
The one kid's like, eagles don't have fangs. And he's like, shut up. He's like, yeah, whatever. And then he calls him whatever his nickname is. It's like, dude, I love the moment too where this is just a quick sidebar. Yeah, penis breath. Where they're
or whatever.
The ass hat or penis. No, it's penis in the house. And he's like, dude, why do you let them call you penis breath? It's like, no, only they can call me penis breath. You can't call me penis breath. I'm like, oh, okay. So that's what we're doing.
That was funny. Predictable joke, but
yeah. But I gotta say, and again, I think that if we had not had Allie come back, I don't know if it would have worked, because again, the two of them, after that dynamic, I thought first episode, the two of them spent the majority of the season apart. I thought that, again, the court scene with them, again, was a little much. And again, of course, Miguel coming in to quite literally save the day. But again, we were rooting for it. We had a feeling it was going to happen, and they did it. Again, Elizabeth Shue, we were kind of already conditioned because she was in the first season of The Boys, but she came back. Allie came back for 2 episodes, very strongly hinting that she was going to get back with Johnny, if not for the fact that Johnny had already gotten together with Miguel's mom the previous night, again, setting up those storylines for future seasons. But yeah, so like, real quick, what did you think of the Allie scene? Like, when they first did that very, very obvious build up to it in the 9th episode, like with the tracking shot with her mom, and then like with her hanging with Johnny that whole episode, and then with her, with her talking with Miguel throughout the first half of the 10th episode. Like, walk me through your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think that when Johnny and Miguel are teaching each other is when the show's at its best. It gets back to why I fell in love with the show in the first place. And so I actually really thought there was a charm there where Miguel's like, "You can't send a book. You just act cool, God." And it's like he oversteps the boundary of him being his sensei because in this situation, Johnny's not the sensei. And I
Right.
love that. I think that not only informs the character, but it's a fun, very charming moment. So, like, the way she was introduced, this is why I bring it up. The way she was introduced, I thought was really well done. It kind of brought Miguel back into a positive light. And I think that's where he started to shine in the back half of the season. And I thought it was also really well done what they did with her cameo. She didn't overstay her welcome. They had that nice little fan servicey moment, but again, it wasn't pandery. I think it served the purpose of the character. It actually showed the growth where Johnny could have cheated, and he almost did. And hopefully in the next season he faces up when he gets more in with Miguel's mother, and he's like, "Look, I did almost kiss her. We didn't because the phone rang." But I think I'm asking questions that I'd be interested to see Johnny answer. And so I think that she helped to enrich the main cast. It was a really well done sort of feature. And I also really enjoyed those moments between her and Danielson. That was nice. It was just the right amount of nostalgia before the big finale. So
Yes, absolutely agree. And again, I think that I'm really hoping that they don't use this as an excuse to make her character a mainstay in the next couple of seasons, because I can see her coming back as like cameo in like later seasons, like seasons 5, 6, however many seasons they said they want to do with the show. Again, I can't believe. Well, that's a point that we'll cover before we get to finish the show. But yeah, I just thought that her coming in was a really, really nice touch. Again, it could have been done wrong, like so many different other things, like just the show in general. And it was just a really good kind of last final nail in the coffin. It's like, yeah, you're and I hope that it is the final nail in the coffin as far as Daniel and Johnny's feud go. Which is like, yeah, you two are both like the same person. That's why like you two are getting together. And again, as funny and as fun as it has been, and as many jokes as I made about it at the beginning of the episode, this feud really does need to go to bed. And for the most part, it definitely does seem like it's going that way. It seems like, again, it's our Rocky Apollo Creed moment. It's our Dom and Brian moment. It's our Cap and Iron Man moment. You know, as far as these bitter enemies that are now the best of friends. We love seeing this in movies. We love seeing this in stories. And again, the creators are very well aware of it. And again, if this was the thing that they were building to the whole time, then kudo and props to them. Now, there was one thing that I did want to hop into before we got off, which is, Chris, you sent me an article today as far as the creators' discussion for the future of the show. So you mentioned season 4. Season 4 famously was announced to already have been announced before, at the time that it was announced that season 3 would be going on to Netflix. So they are currently, I don't think they've started production on season 4 yet, but they hope to do so sometime.
They just wrapped the writer's room yesterday morning.
Excellent. Oh, that's right. I remember.
Or 2 days ago, whatever.
Yeah, I remember Zapka saying that he was going to be that they were in the middle of the writing process, and that interview was filmed who knows how many months ago. So they're getting into production on season 4. But you sent me an article that said that the creators had plans through season. The article mentioned 5 and 6, but I had even heard rumors about like potentially going through like a season 7. And it's interesting because we talked a lot about how kind of like that was a thing that, again, very, very few shows could pull off before, because again, like, the idea being that shows were meant to run forever, but shows never rarely can, because, you know, the human brain can only be so creative with a certain premise for so long. And that's what causes so many shows to overstay their welcome. But we've also talked about how in recent years, kind of the idea of those shorter series of television, those 3 to 4 seasons of television, it just doesn't seem satisfying enough. Like, to me, my perfect number for a television series is 5. That's how many Breaking Bad did it for. That's how many The Wire did it for. As far as I'm concerned, those are both perfect shows that say just what they need to say, but also don't feel like they overstayed their welcome, but feel like they had just the right amount of length. But the one thing I will say is that when a show can find an excuse to go over that limit, you know, Game of Thrones, for as problematic as it got, it still had some hits post season 4. And Sopranos, again, the best show of all time, went 7 full seasons. And for the most part, each one of those seasons was a hit. So my question is, Chris, because this was something that we talked about a little bit. Do you think this show has a legs to potentially go for, again, the show had a very clear direction that it was going for that 3rd season as far as building up to the tournament again. But do you think that they can continue to carry that momentum for a 5th season, a 6th season, a 7th season? You know, it sounds like a lot. It sounds like you're asking a lot, but we know that when a show is a hit, and when it keeps building up steam, and when there are people that will watch it, you know, the creators will listen.
Yeah. This isn't a glow situation either. Like, this is an undeniable smash, viral smash, even, if you will. So Netflix has no right to cancel this, nor do I think that we will see the Netflix trap that we've seen many of our shows fall a little quickly from. So that's a really good question. See, I think one thing that really did this show well was the fact that it was the first of its kind on YouTube. 86 million views on that pilot episode and counting. Huge viral smash. Goes for 2 seasons on YouTube, gets dropped, gets canceled, gets revived. A year and a half goes by. Netflix picks it up, has a whole second life. They very smartly aired the original 2 seasons before it was released, the 3rd season. So we had that in October. The second and first season came out on Netflix, and now we're here 3 months later. It's all been so smart up until this point, but it's also all been so clickbaity, so buzzworthy, so zeitgeisty, trendy. Now they're locked in. They're on Netflix. And now they're like all those other traditional shows where there shouldn't be any more surprises. There shouldn't be any more network changes, which I think all those things really help them. Obviously, it's one of a kind. It's very unique. But let's be honest. All of the buzz and the pop culture sort of surrounding this show really helped it. It's the 80s bubble right now. We have a show about one of the most beloved 80s franchises, bringing those characters back and exploring them in interesting ways. Like, this show is hitting everything to the perfect exact moment of time. So it's tough to say what's going to happen going forward. I do believe in the writing staff. I do think that if we put to bed, like you said, the Daniel and Johnny rivalry and enter a new era of this Cobra Kai, this valley that we're coming to know and love, this world, and further explore these characters and keep asking interesting questions, we'll be okay. But I am nervous hearing 5 and 6. I mean, take it one step at a time. Season 4 is written. It's done. I'm confident in season 4. But just to confirm an X amount of seasons just because you can seems a bit immature to me,
It's definitely a very, very slippery slope, I would say. Again, because we've seen that happen to so many shows where they get renewed. Again, it's a different case for every show. And every show that goes for longer than a certain amount of seasons is a case-by-case basis. It's different for what happened with Lost. It's different for The Wire. It's different for Parks and Rec. It's different for The Office. It's different from Game of Thrones. It's different for The Sopranos. It's different from every show that hit kind of that 5, 6, 7, even 8 season run. Again, we're not talking about sitcoms or procedurals that are designed to go for 20 plus seasons. Again, NCIS is entering its 18th or 19th season. It's Always Sunny is almost season 20. How those shows are still going, I have no freaking idea. But again, we're talking about overly serialized shows. Again, just in recent memory, again, all of these shows, they are making a point to come to an end. 3 or 4 seasons or more. His Dark Materials is over after they are done adapting the books with this next season, season 3. Ozark, they're splitting the last season into 2 parts, but that is still effectively season 4 combined, I think the only shows in recent memory that I can think of that kind of got the long treatment and managed to pull it off overly long, the only show that I can think of is Better Call Saul. And but there are a couple stipulations with that, obviously with the Breaking Bad connections, and also just with, just how talented Vince Gilligan and his writing staff is for them to have that show on the trajectory that it was and still kind of, have that second life, second or the thing that I've noticed about a lot of the longer running shows, and this doesn't necessarily apply to all of them, but it applies to, I think, a decent amount of them, is that they didn't really catch on until their later seasons. The thing about The Sopranos is that The Sopranos was a revolution when it came out, but it really didn't start to become that show, that water cooler show that everyone was talking about until its 3rd or 4th season. And then it became a gigantic thing by the time its last 3 seasons came out. Kind of the same thing with Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones was the talked about show, but it built up steam and it really didn't become that show that everybody was talking about until I would say the 5th season overall. And obviously, again, things have just progressed so much more, in today's modern world. Again, the idea of a show, getting a lot of good talk early on could sometimes be that, the linchpin as far as its overall quality. And it definitely helps that the writers had season 4 planned out and ready to go. But I will definitely say that only because, just for me personally, and again, I'm not speaking to the writers. Again, the writers, they're the ones that are having to create the show, and they're the ones that are having to come up with the storylines as far as where the future of the show goes. I personally don't know where this goes after season 4 that can kind of maintain the pace and the tone that the show has had going, that has made it so good without it kind of falling into that overly silly territory. I thought this season in particular, and the reason why, and just to kind of start to get into my final thoughts, and I think the reason why this season in particular worked for me in a way that season 2 didn't necessarily, is because it managed to get back to the refreshing kind of themes overall of what season 1 was doing, while also leaning into kind of the more ridiculous nature that it had set up for itself. Kind of that silly, self-aware, almost but not quite parody edge. I don't know kind of what other storylines they can pull out as far as post season 4 that can really provide for the show to have. Again, I have no idea what the writers are coming up with, and for all I know, they can completely fool me. That's kind of the only thought. So call it not doubt, but a fair amount of healthy skepticism as far as whether the show has the leg, whether this show is kind of the next in these long line of shows to have the legs to run for that many seasons.
I'm definitely right there with you. I mean, we have so many questions that need to be answered. We have legitimate reasons to write and give us a season 4. And if they can do that again, then I'm confident, because I think this writing staff is pretty solid. They're pretty good at what they do. They get this story, they get these characters, they get the original feel and the heart and spirit of Karate Kid. I mean, the way that they capture Miyagi in this show, it's almost like he's there. You know, they do such a good job of, again, not doing what the original Star Wars trilogy did, where they just force sort of member berries, like you brought up, the South Park thing, on us because, oh, we're going to like that. It's old. It's from the old stuff. See, the new stuff's good because we reference the old stuff. No, they do this with such tact and such maturity that you would not expect this show to do. But again, that's because so far they've really taken their time with this thing. They've really made sure that they've, dotted their I's and crossed their T's, like we're really checking all the dots here. We're making a list and checking it twice in this show so far. I feel like it could get really messy, and I'm afraid that's going to happen.
Yeah.
I actually think that is going to happen, which I hate to say, and I'd love to be proven wrong.
Don't say it. I don't want it to happen. Like, I want to have faith. Again, like, I don't want BoJack Horseman to be the only Netflix show that went, 6+ seasons and was great for the most part every single. I can't. I refuse to believe that I'm like, trust me. I'm like, if Netflix could put out fucking 3 bullshit seasons of Stranger Things, but they could give an introspective creator like Raphael Bob Waksberg the creative room that he needs in order to make his full vision of BoJack Horseman, I'm of the opinion that the Cobra Kai creators can do it. Because again, I like the most recent shows, but I want a show that I can keep tuning into. Like, the fun of Better Call Saul is the fact that I had 5 seasons to get through, and each one of those seasons was paced so well, and each one felt like a chapter. And then it felt like the next chapter in this overly long novel, that I was getting through. That's what I like for my TV. That's why I love the thing that makes The Sopranos and Breaking Bad so great is that you get like 6+ seasons, 5 seasons, like that perfect amount, that feels like it has a perfect beginning, middle, and then 4 seasons is just too short. It's just too short overall. Again, for a show that like I don't like sitting through, and for a show that is just, painful, yes, absolutely wrap that shit up. But also that show never should have been greenlit in the first place, like Ozark, yeah, fucking bring on. I jumped for joy when I found out the next season was going to be the last season, because good God, I want that show to be over. But again, like, I take every show on a case-by-case basis. So
I'm with you. That's the magic of TV for me, is getting to know characters on such a personal level that you just can't get from a film, because you spend so much more time with them. But more times than not, it goes south because there's not enough attention to detail with these characters to keep them gripping and interesting. So far, Cobra Kai's done that. So shall we hit some closing thoughts here before we say our goodbyes?
Yes, we shall. So without a shadow of a doubt, Cobra Kai was definitely the most entertaining start to a year that I think I've ever had. It was, again, for a show that people had to literally force me to watch, and then for me to enjoy the show as much as I have, I never in a million years thought that I would. But while this season to me is still not the best, I think season 1 still has that award. This show definitely to me did what I think Stranger Things season 3 kind of missed the boat on. And I had this as a note overall, because again, if you thought that I wasn't going to take this opportunity to take another dig at Stranger Things 3, you're dead wrong. Which is that the difference to me between Cobra Kai season 3 and Stranger Things season 3. Stranger Things got too scared of its own ambition. I've said this before. The most interesting facets to me of where the Stranger Things characters could have gone were actually explored in season 2 and then abruptly left behind when everyone got scared by the 11th episode. And as a result, season 3 felt like they were taking 3 steps back and making it a little bit too safe for their own good. Versus Cobra Kai, they're going all friggin' in, baby. They know that they're 100% stupid, and they are going all in as far as that goes, with, again, stealing snakes from zoos, even more fights. You wanted it, you got it overall. So with that being said, Cobra Kai is certainly not the deepest show, nor is it the most complex show to watch on TV, but it is a show that everyone can watch. It is a show that everyone will completely understand. It is a show that still sticks to its guns overall, for better, for worse. And you know what? At the end of the day, I respect the show for that overall. And like I said, this is the most fun already that I've had with a season of television in 2021, and the year has only gotten started. So with that being said, I'm giving this season of television of Cobra Kai 4 out of 5 stars.
Nice, man. Yeah, I definitely see all your points, and I agree with a lot of them. I have a lot of fun with this show, and it's something I never thought I would say. It's just, I like when shows are so unapologetically themselves. I like when people are so unapologetically themselves. You know, I feel like that's something I'm drawn to, realness. That we have this world of just mass production, and we see something that works, so we need to mimic it. And we have so many clones out there, so many copycats, and I'm sick of it. And so to have a show like this that could easily have been another one of those clones, 80s clickbait nostalgia. I mean, this is source material from a beloved, coveted 80s franchise. Like Stranger Things is just paying homage to so many different 80s things, but this had a life in the 80s, a huge life too. And for them to just offer so much new to it, it blows my mind. And I love the world building. I love how they bring the 80s into this show. It really enriches Johnny. It really enriches Daniel. You know, you kind of see like these guys are hip, they're kind of young, maybe Daniel more so than Johnny. They're in shape as 50-year-old men, but they're old men too. And so the kids kind of offer new perspectives, and it challenges me. And as I watch this, it really sort of shows that they understand people. And this is a really cool human study in regards to how far we've come as a society and how we, you know, consume our pop culture. That this show does so much really that I would never think freaking Cobra Kai would do or answer or even like beg the question of. It's ridiculous that we can have this deep of a discussion about Cobra Kai. And that's why this is a 4 out of 5 star season. It's
Nice.
not the best, like you said. I do agree season 1 is the best, but goddamn, do I have confidence going into season 4.
Yeah, most definitely. A lot more confidence going into season 4 of this than season 4 of Stranger Things. But real quick, just one last thing that I wanted to leave you with before we kind of set our final goodbyes. So Billy Zabka and Ralph Macchio, how old do you think those two guys are? Off the top of your head.
55 and 54 respectively. Like they
All
look
right.
young.
You're right about one. You're right about one. Billy Zabka is 55. Ralph Macchio's 59. Ralph Macchio's going to be 60 this year.
No way.
61, dude. Look it up. He was a full 4 years older than Johnny when they made the original Karate Kid.
God bless him, man.
He was 23. He was 23 when they did that. He was my age when he did that first Karate Kid movie.
Dude, I had to look up Kreese's age because they might have had a stunt double, but he was throwing punches and kicks, and he's 74. Like
he's in great shape, that guy. Like
there must be something on that set, some sort of, fountain of youth that the Cobra Kai.
It's called the human blood that all of Hollywood feasts on. It's how they maintain their good
God.
blood.
I hope not, because I love these characters.
I've definitely told you that theory on the show. No, not the characters, the actors. You can still love the characters for who they are.
No, I've heard that theory. It's hilarious.
It's
man.
incredible. I'm all the theories. I'm like, look, if Epstein was a real thing, then I totally believe in human vampires. Like
we did just get over 2020. Anything is free.
Exactly.
God bless him, man. I had no idea he was 59.
Yeah, right?
That's insane.
Insane. Absolutely. So, people, with that being said, thank you for tuning into yet another fun-filled episode of Talking TV. Thank you guys for helping us kick off the year. And thanks to Cobra Kai again for helping us kick off the year with as much a blast again. We're hoping to give you guys just as much as Cobra Kai season 3 did with our 3rd season right here. That's right. If you guys leave a subscribe button, you can get us up to 200 subscribers. We can keep giving you guys the content that it is that we hope to deliver to you guys. Again, Chris has got a new series that he's launching on Wednesday. We've got another, just fun little watch-along chat plan for next Friday. The next couple Mondays are going to be interesting because we've got a lot of top 10 lists that we're about ready to roll out next Monday. Again, people, 2001, the year of 9/11 is 20 years old, and so we are going to be covering some of our favorite movies that were released in that year. And then the following 2 Mondays, we will be discussing tentatively our top 10 favorite TV shows and movies of the year. And then the following Friday, January 15th, we're officially beginning it, people, our long trek of the year of covering all, or for the most part, the majority of the Disney Marvel shows that will be released directly on Disney Plus, starting with WandaVision on January 15th. And that's just the tip of the iceberg, people. We've got so much content, so many crazy new things on the horizon for you guys, and we are not stopping. We are like pop star, Chris. We are never stopping here.
It's going to be a lot of fun, man. I think season 2 was an amazing season for our show. I mean, we got up to like 180 subscribers almost, and that's all because of you guys supporting us, and that just lit a huge fire under us, and we have so much coming your way. I mean, we're already 190. We had 88 this morning. Now we're at 190. I mean, you guys are
more people. You can get us there.
You guys are too good to us, so we appreciate it, and this is not where the buck stops. This is the farthest thing from it. Just know that. So
Oh hell no. Yeah, no. We're again, like I said, we're like Popstar. We are never stopping, you know?
yeah.
So
How
yeah,
many blanks in a what, Dom?
12 seasons in a short film, Chris. That's right. We're gonna do it.
Cool,
We're
and-
gonna do it. Hopefully release the short film before the 12 seasons. But
And before we jump out of here, I did pull our Instagram up, but why don't you tell all the people where we're at in audio form, where we're at for social media form? Just let them know, you know?
you can find us on all audio platforms: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Radio Public, all those other places that nobody else listens to aside from Spotify and Apple Podcasts at Talkin' TV Podcast Noji. You can follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Talkin' TV Podcast. Again, as Chris has the page pulled up there again with, his cute little porg, all those Wonder Woman clips. I even did a quick little video on there that was like a New Year's tribute of movies that turned 20 in 2020. That was a lot of fun overall. You guys should check it out. It's how you can stay updated as far as all of our content goes for the rest of the year. And Chris, without further ado, can I do my thing?
I would be remiss if I told you not to. Dom, do you have a final message for the people here tonight?
Watch more fucking movies and TV, people. We out.